Shana Tova. I originally recorded this special Rosh Hashanah message at the conservatory at Plantera, the company that provides all of the flowers for our holiday celebrations and one of our supporters and friends in this community. Unfortunately, there were some technical difficulties, and so I had to re-record this in our backyard. But I want to thank them for welcoming me to their special space. One of the most creative and unique Jewish educators I've ever had the opportunity and blessing of learning from is a man by the name of Gabe Goldman. Gabe always comes up with creative ways of getting his participants in the programs he's running to learn a lesson in the most unusual ways, using unusual props. One summer, I was working with him at a summer camp, and I watched as he worked with a group of counselors at a summer camp who simply didn't want to let go of their tried and true ways of doing something. The problem was, what they were doing wasn't working with the young campers in their charge. So Gabe broke the counselors into small teams to compete in a friendly competition that he calls the Flashlight Challenge. From each team was challenged to construct a flashlight from the items he gave them. They were reminded that the definition of a flashlight is a focused beam of light powered by something to send light out into the world. Each team was given a bag, and in that bag, they found a tin can with a hole poked in the side, some electrical wires to wire things up, a battery, a flashlight light bulb, a candle, a lighter, and some rope. They were also told that the battery was dead or almost dead, and they had to construct their flashlight in exactly 20 minutes. Consistently, throughout the times that I saw Gabe run this project with groups of counselors, the teams that struggled were the ones that did not let go of their idea of a flashlight. They imagined a tube with a power source, some wires, and a light. These teams would wire their batteries to their lights, use the candle wax to hold it together, thinking they're being very creative, and of course it didn't work because the batteries were dead. There was no energy left in them. They didn't work. Nevertheless, they'd continue to try over and over again until their time was up. The teams that succeeded got rid of everything in the bag they knew that wouldn't help them solve the problem. They got rid of the wires, the batteries, the light bulb, because the battery was dead. And the remaining items pointed to the solution. These teams usually solved the entire problem in 5 minutes and spent the rest of the time perfecting it. These teams had to make a flashlight, a focused beam of light with a can, a candle, and a lighter. It was simple, yet vastly different what we might think of as a flashlight. But for those who were able to embrace the new paradigm, it worked because they imagined what could be in this new situation. There's a very famous story in the Talmud about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who's credited with saving Judaism from total annihilation after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 CE. Allow me to set the scene. Up until this point in the history of the Jewish people, ever since the Exodus from Egypt, the Jewish people had worshipped, related to, and connected with God through sacrifices. Each regular day, each Shabbat, each holiday, special sacrifices were performed, designated in the Torah. These sacrifices were performed by the Kohanim, the priests, originally in the Holy Tabernacle in the desert that traveled with the Jews, and then eventually in the Holy Temple in the city of Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was the only place where Jews could sacrifice and hence connect with God. It was a very simple system. You want to give thanks to God? Come to Jerusalem. You want to ask God for something? Come to Jerusalem. You're worried about something major in your life that's coming up? Come to Jerusalem, bring a sacrifice, we'll take care of you. Jewish religious life revolved around Jerusalem. As time went on, and Rome continued to extend its control and insert its culture on the Jewish nation, some groups of Jews, primarily led by the priests and their zealot supporters, began to see the encroachment of Rome as a threat to their religious existence. These bands of zealots became more and more brazen in their revolts against Rome, and eventually, Rome had enough. They sent the great Roman military commander Vespasian, along with 2 entire Roman legions, to squash the rebellion. Because let's be real, Rome doesn't mess around with rebels. They crush them. Eventually, the only band of zealot rebels remaining in the land of Israel existed inside the walled city of Jerusalem. And inside that city, the zealots ruled with an iron fist. Inside the walls of the city under the zealots' control, there was to be absolute obedience. No surrender to Rome, no communicating with Rome, no discussing with Rome, no negotiating with Rome. And Rome surrounded that city. The only way out of the city was in a coffin, because you either dared to cross the zealots and they killed you, or you died of starvation or disease, which was running rampant. Other than that, the Jews of Jerusalem were prisoners in their own city. Amidst the strife, the chaos, the starvation, and looming sense of death, there were a few wise sages who were able to look beyond the current reality. These sages recognized that the writing was on the wall. It was a matter of time until the Judaism that they knew, the Judaism based on relating to God through sacrificing in the temple, was going to come to a very abrupt and violent end. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the leaders of this group of sages, recognized that if the light of Judaism was to survive, Judaism would have to change. And here our real story begins. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai knew that the only way out of the city was to fake his own death and to be carried out in a coffin. So he pretended to be deathly ill. He even asked his disciples, his closest colleagues, to bring something putrid smelling and place it next to him. So anybody who visited would say, oh yeah, the rabbi is grossly ill, he's going to die. Oh, he died. And when he died, they placed him in a coffin with that putrid smelling item just for extra effect. And they carried him out and set his coffin outside the walls of the city. As legend has it, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai stepped out of his coffin once safely outside the reach of the zealots and strolled over to the tent of General Vespasian, because why not? Let's go have a nice cup of tea with the local Roman general. When he approached Vespasian, who I can only assume was reclining, being fanned in the hot summer Jerusalem heat and being fed peeled grapes, he said, "Greetings to you, King, hail the Caesar." Now in ancient Rome, unless you had a death wish, you simply did not ever call someone Caesar who was not the Caesar. You just didn't do it. And thus, Vespasian looked at him and said, "You're liable for 2 death penalties. One, because I'm not the king, and you had the gall to call me the king. The second, because if I am the king, why did it take you so long to come out and see me? I'm the king, pay your respect." Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, in a burst of wisdom, in a burst of divine thought, said, "You may not be Caesar now, but you will be soon." Vespasian's anger started to flare. You could see the steam coming out of his ears, and just at that moment, a messenger came riding up from Rome and said, "Vespasian, rise, for the emperor has died, and the noblemen of the Senate have appointed you as their leader, the next emperor. Hail Caesar Vespasian!" Vespasian, in total shock, looked at the great Jewish sage, realizing he had something deeper, something connection. And he felt he owed something to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and thus he said, I'll be going to Rome soon to accept my new position, and I'll send somebody, probably more ruthless than me, who will continue besieging Jerusalem and waging war on the zealots. But before I leave, ask something of me that I can give you. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai looked at him and realized that the age-old model of connecting batteries through metal wires to an incandescent light bulb wasn't going to work when the batteries are dead. If the light of Judaism was to continue to shine into the world, he would have to work with what he had. And thus he answered Vespasian, and he presented 3 unique requests. His first request was to spare the town of Yavne, a city in southern Israel that had risen as the seat of rabbinic power and thought, and to spare the rabbis working there who were creating a new Judaism. His second request was for Vespasian to spare the dynasty of Rabban Gamliel, a respected leader of the Jewish people who could help rebuild the community. And finally, he asked for doctors to heal the ailing holy rabbi. Each of these requests were brilliant in what they stood for and setting up a new world, a new type of Judaism. It was in Yavne, a small town, where the rabbis began to create a new form of Judaism that could spread God's light in a world without sacrifices. Without the Holy Temple, they could still have God's light. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai knew the batteries were dead, and they weren't contained. Those batteries were no longer contained on the fire on the holy altar, and they weren't contained inside the Holy of Holies anymore. Rather, the energy source for the light of the Jewish people was contained in the study of Torah. Not just the 5 books of Moses, but the total compendium of Jewish wisdom and tradition that exists and is still being written to this very day. The way we celebrate Judaism comes from these rabbis and their heirs and the system that they put in place. Next, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked to be spared Rabbi Gamliel as the head of the rabbinic court. He represented a newly formed leadership structure. And at the same time, he also represented a link to the past. Our tradition tells us that Rabbi Gamliel was a direct descendant of King David. And King David was the only Jewish leader until David Ben-Gurion who was able to unify the Jewish people enough to establish a Jewish country in our ancestral homeland. The Jewish people needed a unifying figure in this time of upheaval, and Rabbi Gamliel represented that relationship. Finally, in asking for doctors to heal the ailing holy rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai demonstrated his understanding that it was not enough to just have Torah as a guiding piece of wisdom. Rather, it must be combined in this new world with the recognition that God's healing powers must be sought through prayer and science, an understanding of the world around us to combine with the holy writings to bring healing and holiness. Well, there were absolutely voices vehemently opposed to what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked for, going so far as to call him the ultimate of fools in not requesting that Vespasian spare all of Jerusalem. Today, standing here on the cusp of 5781, a Jewish New Year, I believe that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did exactly the right thing. In doing so, he set a model for us today. We're living in the midst of a time of great opportunity. There's no doubt that COVID-19 pandemic has been hard for all of us. At the same time, it's providing unique and amazing opportunities to dream and create what a post-corona world might look like. But to do this, we need both to learn from the lessons of Gabe Goldman's Flashlight Challenge and the actions of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. The first thing that we must do stepping into this new world is to acknowledge the batteries are dead. There's no going back to before Corona. We must move forward. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai went so far as to place himself in a coffin, a statement that he was ready to let go of what was in order to save what can be. When I worked at Hillel at Binghamton University, I used to have an argument with students. They would insist that community could exist online. And I said, what do you mean? A community is a group of people gathered together in person. And they'd say, no, it can be online. You can have a community online. I stand here before you today to acknowledge that I was wrong. To my students who might be watching this, my former students, I was wrong. Here at B'nai Moshe, we've proven every day with our minyan, morning and night, that we in fact can convene a wonderful community of caring, committed individuals online. It's possible. The next thing we must do is we must decide what we want to bring with us into this new post-COVID world. Which traditions, memories, recipes, books, experiences, and most importantly, relationships are important for you? What has been a source of light and hope for you? What reminds you of how the world can be better? As we go into this new year, let's find those things that bring us hope, those people and those memories that remind us of the goodness in the world. And then let's use them to create a light for us and those around us. We admitted that the battery was dead. We recognize the pieces we want to bring with us. The final thing we must do as we move into our new world is that we must journey into this new world with a sense of trust that the post-corona world will be okay. The ground won't fall out from under us. We must step out of our homes. We must be willing to re-engage. And we must light our candles, knowing full well that they might blow out. They might not work the first time, but that's okay because we're not alone. What's important is that you strike the match, and together we will bring our lights to an otherwise darkened world, lighting one match to the next, candle to a candle, creating torches to light the way for all of us ahead. I wish you a Shana Tova, a Shana Metuka, blessings for everything to come.